We're going to try to bring this drawing to life in a bold, chunky style. I received this drawing from an anonymous artist and they said, I'd like to go up to the next level. I'm not keen on hyperrealism and prefer something a little more stylized. I'm sort of aiming for a hybrid between John Sargent and JC Leyendecker. But first, we're going to look at the reference image and get a sense of where the primary light source is coming from. This is going to be super important for getting the effect that we want in the style of these two artists. Now, if I just block in all the areas that the light is not touching, I'm going to get a much stronger sense of structure in this face. And it actually reminds me a lot more of JC Leyendecker paintings. If you look at his work, you'll see that there's a kind of a planular structure to how he paints. He's thinking in terms of the direction that those planes are facing and how the light would be shining on those planes. And so I'm seeing this artist focusing a lot on style and drawing in order to get this kind of bold, chunky shapes. I think this area in here is really nice. I think that the drawing in here, these kind of blocky, simplified shapes are really good. Even in here, we're getting a nice kind of planular structure a little bit in there. But then as a whole, overall, we're missing out on this light that is so much brighter than these other areas in the reference image. Your values are just as important as your drawing. These artists understand how to manipulate form. They understand the fundamentals, the bare bones of what makes something look real, what gives it depth. So some quick advice here would be that even if you're not interested in hyperrealism, you need to know how to make something look real. Then go from there and explore and branch out into your style. So to this artist, I would say that you're a lot closer than you think. You're doing a great job in your drawing and simplifying the shapes, but also simplify your values. Give your values direction and structure, and don't forget about the light. The reason why their work stands out like it does is because they're thinking about the shapes of light first. JC Leyendecker especially is so confident in his shapes and in his values that he actually doesn't really blend his edges very much. He lets them stand out. He lets them be strong and sharp and bold, because he knows that the shapes of the light are doing the work of conveying the realism. So right now it might look a little too sharp to have this distinction between the light and the shadow. So let's see if we can use some in-between values to knock that down without softening anything. Now the way that I'm doing this is a little bit different because I'm working with a thinned down layer. Don't think too much about how I'm doing this as much as the desired result. So here I'm using this additional value to darken the lights a little bit, and I'm going to put it down in this kind of in-between plane. We've got a plane here which is facing outward, and then it's starting to roll over. It goes about this way, and then it turns completely to the side. And if you look, you'll see there's that general shape in there. We've got this one, and then this is a little bit darker, and then we carry over into these brighter values. This is kind of starting to convey the structure underneath the surface of the skin, and it kind of comes up here just a little bit. And I especially want to do this in areas where there are going to be gradients. So this is on the cheek here, it's a soft edge. So by putting in this additional value, I know that it's going to kind of round out that edge a little bit. I may have made it too thick in some areas, so I'm just going to erase a little bit of this. So I'm being very careful about the shapes since I especially don't have the luxury to grade these edges down. I'm going to soften the chin with this extra value here. I'm not actually softening anything. I simply put one value down next to another. Even on the nose, I'm going to put in this slightly darker value where the form is turning for those form shadows. We're getting this bold, strong effect. Just going to play around with some of the lights to strengthen some of the planes that are facing the light head on. So I'm just putting in some of these values. They've got these values, they have sharp edges at the edge right here. See, it's a nice sharp edge. This feels a little bit softer, even though it was put with the same bold edge. You've got this bold edge here, but this is kind of pinching this area and helping it really feel like a turn in the plane. It's a bit too dark for what we have, so if I maybe get a value that goes a little bit more in between, I think maybe even brighter, then that might help really give a better description of what's going on. So we'll see how this turns out. Probably going to need to go a little darker in here, and then probably an in-between value. But just these little chunks are explaining the overall form. If I zoom into here and get all focused on these little details, then I could quickly end up with a painting that is perhaps too realistic or too focused on the wrong things. And that's why I'm looking from a distance to make sense of these overall planes. And make no mistake, it is daunting to paint like this because you have to be comfortable with leaving them in their simplified, blocky form. And there's something that takes a courage. A really good exercise you can try is to not allow yourself to blend any edges. Everything has to be laid down with your brushstroke or with your pencil, has to be a single shade for a specific area, and just let it be. You can still create the impression of a gradient as long as you have enough values that are going in between the two areas that you're trying to blend. So just use different values, but keep the edges themselves sharp. You can imagine if you put down a shape and then you're thinking, oh no, it's too strong, it's too bold, I'm just gonna knock it down just a little bit. That's fear. So how do you not be afraid? Well, you train yourself that the light is trustworthy, if that makes sense. Capture the shapes of the light and see what happens. Now, of course, Sargent and Leyendecker both used soft edges, and so it is an art to knowing what edges can be softened, what edges can be left alone, and that's something that I get more into when I'm coaching one-to-one with people. But there are certain principles like how form shadows are relatively soft, cast shadows are relatively sharp. Sharp edges will also pull forward and soft edges will pull back. At the end of the day, it comes down to light and being able to capture form, whether that's done in chunky values or very soft brush strokes. It is all the same principles. These fundamentals you need to learn, you need to master. I do recommend learning the realism side of things and then branching out from there. Don't focus on realism as details. Focus on realism as what are the things that create an impression of 3 dimensions. That's what you need to focus on. That's going to carry over seamlessly into this kind of work. But it might help to restrain yourself from creating those soft edges first as you learn to trust in the light. I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any questions, just reach out. Thank you. Now, I've opened myself up to give free constructive critiques. I don't know for how long, but that's something that I'm doing. It makes it easier for me to make YouTube videos. So if you're interested in improving your skills, you're looking at art coaching as well, then start there, send me your work through the link in the description. Thank you, and take care.